Episode 4, National Museum of Anthropology of Mexico City. At the beginning of the second day of our trip to Mexico, we visited the country's main museum, the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. National Museum of Anthropology, Mexico City. The museum has been open since the 18th century. The museum's collection constantly moved from one building to another. The construction of the modern museum building began in 1963 in Chapultepec Park and lasted a couple of years. The building consists of 23 exhibition halls, encircling the courtyard with a pond and the famous umbrella, a column of concrete around which an artificial waterfall splashes. The column is a prototype of Tlaloc, the god of rain and abundance. The building is surrounded by gardens which also host exhibitions. The exposition of the museum consists of two major sections. The archaeological section occupies the first floor, and the ethnographic section is located on the second floor. Themes of the halls on the first floor. Findings of archaeologists and anthropologists. Introduction to Anthropology. Settlement of America. Pre-classic in the Mexican Highlands. Teotihuacan. Toltecs. Aztecs. Mexiques. Oaxaca. Gulf Coast. Maya. Nordic cultures. Western cultures. Well, what did I want to say? The architect who created this masterpiece is probably a very highly educated and knowledgeable person, because it seems like all the symbols were used very competently. At the entrance, there is a large column, which is like the tree of life, and this tree holds a big roof like the sky. And this flowing water is like information. There are halls with exhibits along the perimeter. I wondered with what knowledge of symbols all this was invented and designed. There was a certain magical field, especially in the center of the sun. It was in the very center. Do you mean the Aztec calendar? Yes, each exhibit took its place with its own energy. I have been to many museums, for example, in the Museum of Cairo, but everything is somehow very chaotic there, and there is no connection between the exhibits. An orchestra was created here. That is, you felt the system in the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, the relationship between objects and exhibits, but you don't feel it in the Cairo Museum? Yes, I liked it very much. During the visit to the museum, along with impressions from the bright and powerful exhibits of Mesoamerican civilizations, the meeting with Teotihuacan Ruge, a Mexican anthropologist, ecologist, and filmmaker, was no less a discovery and impression for the group. On the eve of the trip, Teotihuacan kindly agreed to provide professional commentary on several of the museum's exhibits, mostly in the Mayan halls. To date, Teotihuacan Ruge has made 3 films: Narozov, Deciphering the Mayan Script, 2000; Dreaming of Tulam, a tribute to Federico Fellini, 2011; Spaceship Earth, 2020. The first film is dedicated to the process of deciphering the Mayan script and the contribution that Yuri Valentinovich Narozov made to this process. Yuri Valentinovich Narozov, 1922-1999. Ukrainian, Russian, and Soviet scientist, was born in Ukraine in the Kharkov province. Graduated from the Department of Ethnography of the Faculty of History of Moscow State University in Moscow. As a Mayan scientist, with his ingenious decoding of the Mayan script took place in St. Petersburg. A preliminary report on the decipherment of the Mayan script was published by Yuri Narozov in 1952. These unique photographs, taken by Yuri Knarozov during his visit to Mexico, have been preserved thanks to Tia Hogoruga. She was a young anthropologist in the 90s, for whom Knarozov is a legend. Even her parents told her about Knarozov. And so she opens a newspaper in 1995 and finds out that Knarozov is in Mexico City. She comes to one of the big meetings with him, gets to know him and Galina Ershova. And he makes such an impression on her that Ruge understands that she should make a documentary. With her own money, she finds operators, equipment, and starts filming. As far as I understand from the context, Knarozov, already middle-aged and not spoiled by attention, was pleased that this young girl was looking at him so enthusiastically, and that he was the hero of a documentary film. And there were a lot of shootings, and they turned out bright. The creation of a civilization that turned out to be equal to the ancient Eastern, I think, not only me, but everyone was amazed from the very beginning. He spoke very slowly, walked very slowly, hunched over. This man aroused tenderness in me. He seemed very weak, as if he needed to strain his last strength to talk about his discovery. It's wonderful that life pushed us together at that very moment. I've been waiting for this meeting for decades. This is the only civilization, Maya, in Mesoamerica that had a developed language in the writing system. Among the pre-Hispanic cultures, only the Maya had such a developed writing system, which was unraveled and deciphered by Dr. Yuri Knarozov. In the halls of the Mayan Museum of Anthropology, stone steles are presented. Each stele usually captured a historical moment in Maya culture. Usually, part of the images of the stele is the Mayan script that describes the event that is happening. The following stele describes what happened in 1725 AD during the classical period of the Mayan civilization. After this, the decline of the classical period of Maya civilization began. If you look at this face, you will see a beard. This is not exactly where the Maya lived, because no Mesoamerican culture had men with long beards. This exhibit is from the territory much to the west, from Tabasco, where there was the influence of different ethnic groups and cultures. There is an assumption that earlier peoples from Africa arrived in the territory of Camalcalco, and only then mixed with the civilizations of the Olmecs and Maya. Often, there is a combination of a stele and an altar together. The stele usually describes the historical event itself, what it is about, and the altar is used for offerings. Migration flows lasted for many centuries, until the Mayan ancestors came to the Promised Land, the Yucatan Peninsula. There are a lot of special ceramics here. Here are all the animals, flora, and fauna of the Yucatan Peninsula. The Maya were excellent artists, and they could depict animals very accurately. The jaguar, the snake, and other animals with whom they associated the gods. You can also see bats here, which in the Maya culture were considered very important creatures, messengers of the messages of the night.
Because obviously they were the biggest enemies, the natural forces that had to be overcome. And you also see the bat. Here are the bats, which we will go to another one where you will see more specifically how these glyphs function and how they get into different parts.
This is one of the most important steles, and here come the symbols of Mayan writing. And this is the social structure of the Mayan society that the Maya civilization had for over 1,000 years. This social and political structure allowed the institutions of power to function successfully and civilizations to develop.
Over 1,000 years, and this social and political structure is what allowed them to function as a civilization. No. How at least over a million. Yes. They were thriving, very thriving country. I mean, among all the cities, and then also the communication. Yes. Here you can see more clearly how they work, and each one of the glyphs, you can either have
Very clear and good depiction of the Mayan symbols. On their example, you can see how they work. Each of the several characters put together is one word that comes together from 2, 3, 4, and 5 characters, which are syllables. It also additionally presents the number symbols that are included in the dates.
because no one was aware that this would happen like this. And also here you have numbers. When you have this is the number 5, and this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a 9, and this is a date. They did a lot of codices, and they wrote, their books.
The Maya had a huge number of codes, Mayan books. Unfortunately, most of the Mayan books were burned by the monks of the Catholic Church with the arrival of the Spaniards. The mission of the Spanish priests was to convert the Indians to Catholicism. They believed that everything the Mayans do is from the devil. Diego de Landa, who was a highly educated clergyman, sought to preserve Mayan text media, and he wrote a book on Mayan symbols that Knorozov used to decipher the Mayan code. Then, other priests forced Diego de Landa to burn all the Maya codices that were not yet burned, because the Spaniards wanted to destroy all the Mayan writings.
He wrote a book about the Mayan scripts, which is what Knorozov used to start his decipherment. The amazing architecture of the Mayans, which you will see, they really had, even nowadays.
The Maya had amazing architecture. Even today, new Mayan sites and cities are found in the area of Maya activity. The buildings and structures of the Maya were carefully thought out and accurately built, both cities and temples. Here you have a Mayan object, a work of art. This is an amazing piece of art. In some archaeological areas, such as Koba, huge stelae are found. Each stone has its own steles and a unique style of describing what events happened in this place. And this is manifested in writing on steles, in ceramics, and in architecture.
Certain archaeological sites, especially in Teotihuacan and they had huge steles. So each archaeological site had different steles, had their unique, distinguished way of expressing what happened. All in all, it is one same sculpture and one same symbolism. But of course, each place had their very own distinctive way of doing it.
Carlos led a tour of the magnificent National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, where Ramon joined us. Carlos warned me that the visit would shift my assemblage point and could seriously tire me out. This is only the first excursion of many others, so we should not dive into it, but only jump around. Mage's Apprentice, My Life with Carlos Castaneda, Amy Wallace.
Here is the ruler, and here is the slave.
The ruler and the slave are depicted here, and from this side along the edge you see a large number of Mayan symbols, and they all describe what happened, what is depicted on the stele.
What is happening?
Я вижу, что даже сейчас, когда вы через столько лет про это говорите, у вас слезы наворачиваются. Он для вас много значил.
Sí,
Да.
sí, Norosov.
Кнорозов для меня был человеком, который хотя и...
I see that even now, when you talk about it, you have tears in your eyes. Did he mean a lot to you? Yes, Knorozov was for me a person who, although not physically present here, is still infinitely grateful to fate for the opportunity to know him, for meeting him, for being able to learn a lot from him, for that incredible journey. Everything that happened was a real miracle. As if since childhood I had some plan that I prepared for this meeting. When it took place, everything was ready for it. I knew what to ask him, how to do everything right. It was a miracle.
Как все сделать правильно. Это было чудо.
Magia. The normal people were buried in different ways. You know, they were just put in the ground, or they were put in.
Ordinary people were buried differently from the rulers. Ordinary people were simply placed underground. And at the burials of the nobility, vessels with special contents were visited with her. Until the 1950s, no one believed that Mayan pyramids were used for burials. Shortly before 1952, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruz in the Temple of the Inscriptions noticed that the floor was different from the floors in other similar temples. It was made of large stone slabs. Well, as it should be according to all the canons of uncomplicated adventure films, one plate was not the same as all the others. Alberto Ruz lifted up the slab, revealing a cellar and a staircase leading down, strewn with rubble and broken stones. A team of archaeologists took apart this blockage for 4 years, eventually reached the end of the stairs, and found the entrance to an elongated room. In the middle of the room stood a sarcophagus in the form of a large stone box, covered with a painted slab. It was the burial place of the ruler of Palenque. In the same 1952, Yuri Valentinovich Knorozov found the key to Maya writing without visiting any archaeological site in Mexico. And here in front of you is Pacal's jade mask from this burial. And here's Pacal himself. And how he lay in the sarcophagus when he was found.
Оригинал будет в Палентке. Из нефрита все украшения полные.
Pacal. The original will be in Palenque. Carlos certainly wanted to show us the famous statue of the ruler of Palenque in full growth, in a burial robe made from a huge single piece of jade. Carlos explained that the clear lines that cross the chest of the statues are rays of energy, that, when tensed, do not have the slightest deflection, which distinguishes an impeccable warrior. He referred to someone in the group who came to him so weakened that they were trapped in their own weakening energy beams, but by self-discipline pulled them up. Mage's Apprentice, My Life with Carlos Castaneda, 2006, Amy Wallace. Tiana, hi. Good evening. Hello. It's already 1:30 a.m. for me. While this is still remembered, on the second day of our trip, we visited the Museum of Anthropology of the city of Mexico City. Tell me, please, this mask of Pacal, the contact with it, how did it go? If something is remembered. It is not just remembered, it is not forgotten like that. First impression, it was not I who came into contact with her, but she came into contact with me. If you remember, I was led there, my head was spinning, even some nausea appeared, I staggered. Then we got out of there. And then, purposefully, we returned there with Laura and Sarah, and a minimal mini channeling happened. First, what struck me, maybe it sounds idiotic that we know each other, and that it's not human. This is some kind of essence, some kind of consciousness, some kind of intelligence that came from a teacher. That is, this energy was embodied. This is some kind of essence, some kind of consciousness, some kind of intelligence that came as a teacher. That is, this energy was embodied, took some form for itself, in order to teach some nations and races something, roughly speaking, try to develop awareness, take, for example, corn and lead it to something, teach it something. As a result, this essence descended to give some knowledge, and in the end, it didn't work out.
И у них там определенные знания оставались, но, видимо, они как-то были... Ну, в общем, эта суть спустилась для того, чтобы дать какие-то знания. И в итоге это тоже не получилось. Вот. И
This is certainly some kind of light consciousness, an adept of light, and I thought he was very handsome. I knew this. So you mean Pakal? Yes, Pakal. He is worshipped as a god. He was beautiful. He had a couple. There was a queen. She still needs to be dealt with. Red Queen? Yes. Sometimes they come with a pair. They divide by two and come together as yin and yang. Or this was a different essence and they went together. When the switch happened, I realized that we knew each other, and I began to understand the meaning of what was hanging on it, what it was buried in. There were so many artifacts on the fingers, some kind of antennas in the ears. Even in the mouth, in my opinion, there is something in it.
то ли это какая-то высшая цивилизация, которая уже в плазменной форме существует и материю себе берет, то ли это...
Yes, but these things seemed familiar to me, and I tried to understand what kind of mind it was. On the one hand, it is the mind. On the other hand, it is a connection with the Mayan civilization. And I was trying to figure out how it fits together. Whether it is a higher civilization that exists in a plasma form and takes matter for itself, there is also a ship present there as an object. The main sensation from the contact is the sensation of the brightest light through the mask. The light hit precisely the pineal gland, which is why I felt dizzy. I felt completely peaceful from there. Then, during the subsequent excursion during the day, I kept a state of somewhat even account. You know, this impression is like lightning.
Вот эта маска, она просто меня ударила, чтобы я остановилась и что-то вспомнила.
This mask, it hit me right, so that I would stop and remember something. You know, it's interesting, the fact that you voiced that it was not a person, or a symbiosis of a person with something deserves attention, because people do not glare like that. Compared to an ordinary person, it is hundreds of times, if not thousands, more powerful. Do you know what association I had? As with the shroud of Turin, when the body disintegrated into photons during the ascension of Christ, so here the energy remained in the crystal lattice of this mask. There is a lot of energy information left in this mask, in the crystal lattice of jade. Is it jade or what kind of stone? Yes, it was jade, green. Jade is a very interesting stone. Here we can remember the Chinese with their jade emperor. Yes, the jade Buddha, as an example, for which entire states fought in their time, for a statue. To be continued.
Абсолютно, да. Вот, поэтому...
Él es el fuego, porque están las Xicoatl, las serpientes del fuego. Él es el agua, porque se manifiesta como Tlaloc. Y también en su concepto dual como Madre Tierra, como Tonantzin.
Вот смотрите, вот эта вот картина слева очень какая-то крутая. Ее всегда скрывают, но она темная. Ее даже не увидеть, что изображено.